is fulfilling those obligations. Now, just to remind you, Moscow has repeatedly been accused by Western leaders for fighting against the Syrian opposition, not Islamic State. Now, Putin says that talks are currently underway with elements of the Syrian opposition for a joint military action against ISIL. Agreements as to which territories not to bomb, and Vladimir Putin is saying that Russia is fulfilling those obligations. Now, just to remind you, Moscow has repeatedly been accused by Western leaders for fighting against the Syrian opposition, not Islamic State. Now, Putin says that talks are currently underway with elements of the Syrian opposition for a joint military action against ISIL.
Part of the armed Syrian opposition considers it possible to begin active military action against terrorist groups, mainly Islamic State, if our jets support them, and we're ready to provide such support.
Moscow, time and again, has called for all sides to combine efforts in the war against Islamic State. Those forces, according to Vladimir Putin, should include Russia, the U.S.-led coalition, the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and also the Syrian opposition.
A difference in atmosphere, wasn't there, between this G20 and the G20 12 months ago?
Well, Putin is saying that he's actually had a good impression that there is general interest to continue close dialogue. And indeed, we heard such voices from various Western leaders before the summit and in the course of the summit. Let's listen in.
It's clear to me that we must work together to defeat this scourge of terrorism that is a threat to Britain, a threat to Russia, a threat to us all. The cooperation between Russia and other countries, especially the United States, is so important also in this context. I mean, refugee crisis, not only for stabilization in Syria, but also for Europe as a whole.
Now, this is quite an interesting twist, a significant change of rhetoric, a U-turn compared to what we heard just a short while ago from many Western leaders, statements like those ones, for example.
Speaking of Brzezinski's argument that the U.S. should retaliate against Russia for Russia's attacks on U.S. assets in Syria is a stunning admission from a senior high-level policy advisor here in the U.S. that the U.S. is in fact using Al-Qaeda and perhaps Islamic State as well as assets. This is not something that is normally admitted by officials in Washington, D.C. That is, that Al-Qaeda in Syria, the al-Nusra Front, is actually a U.S. ally. I think the American people will be very interested to hear that just 14 years after the attack of September 11th, 2001, which were officially blamed on Al-Qaeda, which even then was called by some people al-CIA, having had relationships with the U.S. in the Afghan jihad against the Soviet Union, that this supposedly demonized enemy group that we're told was responsible for killing 3,000 Americans on September 11, 2001, is now our ally in Syria, and we should go to war with Russia and risk a nuclear war that could end life on the planet in order to punish Russia for fighting against Al-Qaeda. It's kind of mind-boggling that anyone could even imagine the U.S. retaliating against Russia for Russia's attack on Al-Qaeda. But that's precisely what Brzezinski said. And Brzezinski